Good day, all viewers. Selamat datang and welcome to the International and Domestic Virtual Colloquium COMAC 2022 by Institute of Teacher Education International Languages Campus, or better known as IPG KBA, with the theme Going Global, Internationalizing Education. I'm Tanvir Kaur Sekon, a lecturer in the English Language Department here at IPG KBA. I will be the moderator for this interesting session today. We hope you will join us till the end of the session because we have two notable speakers for today's forum, which is entitled Training Teacher Globally, Becoming a Teacher in a Land Far, Far Away. Before we get to know them, please allow me to lay out a few housekeeping matters. First, everyone who attends this webinar series will be given an e-certificate after each session. Therefore, do not forget to register now. The registration link is as shown in the comments section right now. Second, we would love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to send it through the chat box. The speakers will answer your questions at the end of the session. And last, it would be much appreciated if you could share the link for today's webinar with your colleagues and friends right now. Let's get started. Pre-service teacher education programs aim to prepare graduates to become quality teachers equipped with pedagogical practices that will serve to meet the increasing demands associated with the teaching profession. Over the last decade, the focus on developing quality teachers has received increased attention. Therefore, providing quality pre-service teacher education and curating relevant courses for in-service teachers is essential to achieve this goal. In short, high-quality teachers need high-quality training. So an ideal pre-service education would combine sound theoretical and pedagogical exposure as well as adequate field experiences for pre-service teachers to test out theories, techniques, and approaches in a real teaching space. We also need to provide pre-service teachers with real opportunities to reflect, share, and discuss on these experiences with other pre-service teachers and experts, for example, by providing a platform where pre-service teachers discuss about learning how to learn, learn how to teach, where they ask the questions and answer them, followed by feedback from an expert teacher or teacher educator. IPG KBA, via this mini forum, is doing just that today. We are bringing together a panel, two pre-service teachers to discuss their experiences and perspectives about learning how to teach and teaching children how to learn. We will then discuss more about pre-service teacher education with a very experienced teacher educator. Now allow me to introduce our speakers for today. Let's begin with Selina. Selina Dwi Anggini is a final year student of the English Education Department from University of Muhammadiyah, Tangerang, Indonesia. Recently, she's just finished her one-semester mobility program in University Putra Malaysia as an awardee of ISMA, Indonesian International Students Mobility Award, one of the most prestigious scholarships provided by the Indonesian Ministry of Education. The second speaker is Wei Yang. Wei Yang is an international final year undergraduate student from northern China. He is majoring in teaching of English as a second language, TESOL, at University Putra Malaysia. He has a passion for current research on the teaching of English as a foreign language. He hopes to be an inspired researcher and a language teacher who can create impactful changes to his community. The third speaker is Dr. Nurhakimah Kaiza Ahmad. Dr. Nurhakimah is currently a senior lecturer at the Department of Language and Humanities Education, Faculty of Educational Studies, University Putra Malaysia. In 2021, she was directly involved in COMAC at IPG KBA as the assistant coordinator and also the moderator. She has recently published her third book chapter on the use of digital pictures as metaphorical sources for qualitative data. As for now, she supervises local and international students for PhD and MSc programs. Her research interests include grammar teaching, teacher identity, and second language teacher education. So, without further ado, let's get on with the topic of today's forum: training teacher globally, becoming a teacher in a land far, far away. Miss Selena, can you please tell us about your experience studying here in Malaysia?
Sure.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? So,
Yes, yes,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Okay.
okay. Uh,
So I'm not
so I'm
trying
not
to
trying
teach
to
reading
teach
or
reading
anything,
or anything.
but joining a
Showing
mobility program in UPM is one of the best things that I've ever experienced in my life. And I'm being serious here. I mean, I never imagining myself.
Selena, can you switch on your camera? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
yes.
turning
We
the
can't
camera
see
now.
you.
Camera.
You can't see
You
me.
can't see me.
Yes.
Um,
Um,
okay, I think there's
okay.
a
I think
problem.
there's a problem.
Okay, it's okay. Please carry on, Selena.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
So,
I mean, I never imagined myself studying abroad in one of the top universities in Malaysia, but then it really happened. So I want to say thank you so much for Indonesian government, the Ministry of Education for giving me this opportunity. Just a little information. I applied for a scholarship program from the government called IISMA. It stands for Indonesian International Students Mobility Award. And I'm really grateful that I got the spot and being the awardee in UPM. I was able to experience being a mobility student and then studying for one semester in UPM. It was really amazing. Even though Indonesia and Malaysia are really similar, but we know that in terms of English, it's quite different. English is a second language in Malaysia, right? Meanwhile, in Indonesia, it's a foreign language, so it barely being used by Indonesian people on daily basis. And as a pre-service teacher, I want to know how are the differences of educational system in both countries, especially for English class. If I can be honest, actually, I feel like one semester is not enough for me to observe all the differences. But during that one semester, I really learned a lot because in my home university, I didn't take this course. It's called English Language Teaching Materials. It's a class from Dr. Kim, my lecturer in UPM, and I was able to experience whole new things and new materials from this class. So thank you so much, Dr. Kim.
So I gather that you had a good time and you learned new things here or while you were in Malaysia. Uh, Selena, when you started doing your teaching practice back in Indonesia, after you've learned, you spent one semester here in at University Putra, Malaysia, and when you went back to do your teaching practice in Indonesia, how did this new knowledge, the learning theories, the teaching approaches and techniques play out in the real world or in the real classroom? Can you please share your thoughts, Selena?
All right. Can I
all
explain
right.
this with PowerPoint? I feel like I can explain it better with the PowerPoint presentation. Okay.
Selena, please switch on your mic.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I'm
Yes.
preparing the slide right
I'm
now.
preparing the slide right now.
All right. Okay. Okay, Selena,
Yes.
is everything okay? Should I speak to Wei Yang first?
Oh, sure. It's good.
Oh,
I
sure.
think
It's good. I think
it's better.
Okay, we can't see your slides
it's
here.
better.
Yes, you can proceed with Wing Yang
Yes, you
first.
can proceed with Wing Yang first.
All right. Okay. Um, Selena, go probably will speak to Wei Yang first. Wei Yang, can you please tell us about your experience training to be a teacher here in Malaysia? Can you switch on your mic, please?
Okay. Well, I have to say it
Wei
was
Yang,
an amazing journey.
we can't hear you.
Yes. Yes. So I just said, well, it was an amazing journey
We can't hear you.
because
Please
I
switch on.
gained knowledge.
I just it was an amazing journey
Yeah,
because
I gained knowledge about interdisciplinary
because I
subjects
gained knowledge
such as
about interdisciplinary
educational
subjects
psychology,
such as
educational sociology,
educational psychology,
and second
education.
language acquisition. So those are three courses that I would like to especially just to highlight here because I learned the essence of tackling students' mentality in my educational psychology class. I learned the importance of, just the importance of managing classroom with different teachers from my educational sociology class. Likewise, I also learned the importance of infusing different pedagogy to my classroom. So therefore, I definitely believe that the university gave me chances to gain different knowledge from cross-sectional subjects. Furthermore, I would also like to point out that teaching practicum was meaningful to me as well because I was able to infuse theory into practice to see whether those theories are applicable or not. So I guess those my experience in the university, which was fulfilling and fantastic. Thank you.
In China. How was the campus like? Uh, can you just share this briefly?
Okay. Okay, so I just think my mic just breaking up. So could you please just rephrase your questions again? Because
Sorry.
the mic was
How
not that
was
stable
your
at this
Not that
moment.
stable at this moment.
sorry? How was the campus life here back in here in Malaysia as compared to in China? And in terms of the campus life, could you just share with us briefly?
So you are asking about the campus life, right, in Malaysia?
How was the campus life here in Malaysia?
Yes. So
Can you hear me?
So
yes, I think campus
yes,
life
I
was
think
amazing
campus life was
because I
amazing
was able
because
to meet different people, understand different culture, and also understand different language. So that's the reason why I said campus life was amazing for me because I was exposed to a multicultural community where I could meet people. So that was the most crucial things for me to say here. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Wenya, I'm just going to repeat that. when you started doing your practicum, teaching practicum back in China, how did this new knowledge, the learning theories, the teaching approaches and techniques play out in the real world or in the real classroom?
It had some challenges because the different pedagogies in two countries are totally different. So in Malaysia, I found that teachers would support Aristotelian kind of communication with students in classroom. However, in China, we kind of support Confucianism-based activity, Confucianism-based discussion in a classroom, meaning that teachers talk while students take notes, and jot down those important things for them. But I would also like to mention that, China has already tried different kind of approaches alongside with Confucians based learning, because they also believed that using different approaches would be the best. So that is the reason why you could see that a plethora of teachers in China nowadays would like to try different pedagogies such as project-based learning, group-based communication, and kind of activities. So I think that is a difference between China and Malaysia. Of course, I would also like to share the other findings in the letter because I prepared the slides which specify what kind of the areas which will tell the differences between the pedagogy in China and Malaysia. So thank you for asking me about this question.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the teaching and learning is moving away from teacher-centered learning to more student-centered learning, and giving students more opportunities to take part and just sit back and listen in the classroom. So that's wonderful. Can you talk more about your teaching practice there in China?
So, like I said, I will share slides. I will share slides in the letter. Yeah. So, just expect to hear more. Thank you for asking anyway.
So Wen Yang is going to share his experience. He was doing his teaching practicum back in China.
Hi again, I'm today's presenter, Wei Wen Yang, and to be specific, I will share some detailed findings relating to ESL teaching and learning at a primary school in China. So, without further ado, let's start it. About the primary school. the school that I did my practice to would be located in Chengdu City, China. There were 2,850 students over there, and they had different English levels. Diving into the major content, I'll be sharing 3 things today. Some highlights of my teaching practice, including look and talk activity in grade 1, group-based discussion in grade 4. Second, from what I learned, students' emotions matter. Be aware of the language. The use of flashcards is helpful. Assessment scales should be balanced. Last but not least, I would also like to point out the differences I experienced between theory and practice, including technology acceptance, disciplinary action, and second language acquisition. So before I start today's presentation, I would like to ask all of participants here, so just think a little bit. What do you think about teaching a language, for instance, English? So what is your reaction toward it? Can you please share your answers in the chat box? Anyone wants to share? Okay, 3, 2, 1. No one wants to share? Okay, so maybe I can share my reactions towards teaching a language such as English. So sometimes I found that teaching English, especially teaching English, requires a lot of effort for teachers. And sometimes I also believed that teaching a language could be very daunting. So why am I thinking about this? Well, I would like to share you some highlights in my ESL teaching and learning. So as you know, at the beginning of my teaching practicum, I felt so worried about teaching because I would always try to come up with an approach to students who have different English levels. Therefore, through the process of preparation, I was able to understand the different students who requires different needs. For instance, while teaching grade 1 students, I found that look and talk activity would be a perfect match for them because they tried to speak English, which was a good indicator. Moving on to the second slide. While teaching grade 4 students, I found that group-based discussion would be very helpful as those kids need some exposure in discussing with their peers. Therefore, I was able to execute lessons smoothly based on my observation and preparation. As a result, they enjoyed the lesson. So those are 2 highlights of my teaching practicum that I would like to share. The reason behind it, again, would be that teaching different learners need to have different kind of strategies. For grade 1 students, look and talk activity would be good, while for grade 4 students, group-based discussion would be better. Second, so what I learned during this teaching practicum alongside those highlights in my teaching practice, well, there are 4 points that I would like to share with you guys. So you guys can check whether you have the same consensus with me or not. So first, students' emotions matter. So why am I saying that? Well, I would like to cite one of the scholars saying here from Arnold in 2011. So he said, negative emotions make learners less focused on the task, while also making the learning experience itself less pleasant and therefore less effective. Indeed, sometimes teachers need to focus on students' emotions. In other words, if students are happy about you, about teacher and the lesson, then they can gain knowledge and vice versa. So in this case, what I did would be centered on 3 things. First, be friend with students. Second, support them whenever they need. Last but not least, praise good behaviors. So I would like to give you one of the examples that can illustrate on this point. Be friend with students. So my students, those grade 1 top kids, would always like me playing their favorite BBC documentaries during class break. So in that process, we communicated with each other. We were able to understand with each other. Therefore, they felt happy about having a teacher like me because I would always just, giving them what they want. As a result, through the discussion, I was able to understand their learning preferences, which was amazing. Also, I was able to understand their learning, what kind of the learning that suited them best. Therefore, that's the reason why I would say befriending with students would be the best approach. Second, be aware of the language. Of course, in the process of teaching, I was also aware of the language that I use. The reason behind it is because saying from Travis in 2014, I would like to cite here. First, he said, must let children see the beautiful and useful aspects of the language, and must let them love you as a language teacher and a new language as well. So for that, what I did would center on 3 things as well. I used the most simple words and sentences. Second, I adopt a written translation strategy on slides. Last but not least, I also tend to speak very slowly and clearly. So, for instance, when students did not understand about the certain words like riddle, so instructed by my mentor, she told me that I should not just directly tell students what's the meaning of the riddle in Mandarin because my mother tongue was Mandarin. Therefore, she suggested that I could put a translation besides this word riddle so that the students can follow the lesson without having some sort of interruption. Indeed, this approach tended to be very successful as I did not have to utter the translation out to them as well, and they could understand the meaning of the words. So it will help me in executing the class, in executing my lesson. I also highly recommend that you guys can try this approach while teaching those students who took English as their second language. Moving on to the third point, the use of flashcards is helpful. Well, according to Sintampu in 2013, he found that the students were taught by using flashcards could memorize the words easily, be more motivated to learn English, and understand vocabulary easily. In fact, this approach was fantastic because this was also what my mentor suggested me to do, especially when teaching students at a low level English students. So what I did would be find durable materials, ensure the visibility, and align with the instructional approach, such as strategic interaction. To illustrate, as you can see here, I used flashcards on Blackboard. So I was teaching students their favorite clothes. So in the pre-lesson, I asked those young kids, what kind of clothes do you wear today? And then they would tell me what kind of things that they wear. In this case, I would intentionally just pull out the flashcards that I prepared to them beforehand and showing them what is the meaning of those clothes in English. Indeed, they tended to show interest toward this approach. So this is also how I implemented strategic interaction to my students while using flashcards. So this was very helpful because students were able to memorize those words for a long time, even after 2 weeks 2 weeks or 3 weeks later. So this was also amazing. Last but not least, assessment scales should be balanced. Why, you might wonder? Because the formative and summative components complemented each other in providing a more realistic estimate of students' overall achievement. This is based on in 2010. So what I did was to add in-class quizzes from time to time, or have some peer evaluation in speaking in English speaking class. Third, sometimes I even ask students to reorganize a story in teaching plot in English literature. Last but not least, if teachers want to test out their pronunciation, reading out loud would be the best approach for them. For instance, I would like to give you an example about how to use in-class quizzes in your own classroom. Well, in my classroom, I sometimes would just include this small quiz for my students because I just wanted to test out their understanding toward the previous content that I taught to them. So I was teaching them about the characteristics of animals. So this is a long snake. This is a thing that I have taught them beforehand, showing them this quiz. So after I have done so, I would ask my students a little quiz. Okay, guys, let us do a quiz together. So what do you think about this question? Choose long, tall, and short. And the students would choose, well, this snake is long in order to respond to my questions. By that time, I clearly understood that the students, just understood the characteristics of the animals through this quiz time. Moving on to the last part, I also experienced the differences between theory and practice alongside those epiphanies that I learned during my practicum. So in university, I learned technology, educational technology to be specific. So I was told that I also learned that teachers nowadays should just use technology as much as possible because new technology brings immense benefits to teachers and students. For instance, teachers can use Metaverse, Loom, Peer Deck, or Nearpod to execute lessons because students tended to show their interest toward a whole lesson. However, in the practicum field, I found that not enough teachers understand how to use technology in classroom. So for instance, from the teachers around me, I found that they only knew how to play an audio for students, show the picture to students, and even some, just display some presentation slides to students. But apart from that, they did not about knowing technology at all. So I leave you out this question. What do you think about technology? Do teachers around you know how to use technology in your classroom? So think about it a little bit. Moving on to the next thing, disciplinary action. In university, I learned that the teachers should put themselves in students' shoes, which aligned with educational sociology class. However, there are 80% teachers that would discipline students for any reason. For instance, teachers in their school would sometimes discipline students for not bringing books to the classroom, for not submitting homework on time, for not just behave properly. However, I would argue that teachers should definitely think about a little bit why students do this. Why should we not just discipline students based on their superficial phenomenon? So just think about it because every action has a reason behind it. Last but not least, I also would like to talk a little bit about second language acquisition. In the university, in second language acquisition class, I learned how to help students acquire and learn a language, and I also learned how students talk in a language classroom. However, 80% in-service teachers find it hard to let students acquire and learn a language, and they, as a result, pay less attention to student speech pattern. So if you studied second language acquisition class, there were a plethora of theories out there to support teachers to help students learn a language. However, the teachers that I worked with have a little knowledge about those things. Instead, they would prefer execute their lesson just based on their years of experience, but not based on the theory. So I also leave you out a question for you. So is this a phenomenon that also appear in your country as well? So you need to think a little bit about the second language acquisition. In sum, I shared my highlights in my teaching practicum. I also just share some things that I learned during my practicum. Last but not least, I compared some differences between theory and practice. So that would be the ending session of my sharing. So thank you for listening.
Very much, Wenya. So you made some very important. Thank you very much, Wenya. Thank you, lovely. I think you were breaking up a bit here and there. I'm so sorry to the viewers. I'd like to apologize for that. But there was lovely sharing there, Wenya. You made some very important observations during your teaching practicum. You incorporated techniques that would work well with your students. You used look and talk, group-based discussions, and you were sensitive to the students' needs. You spoke slowly so they can understand you, and you also used technology in your teaching and learning. And one observation that I would like to talk about here is that you stated that you paid attention to the pupils' emotional states, that you realize that they need to be in a positive emotional state before learning can take place, that you need to be friends with your pupils. So when you reflected upon your teaching to be able to make this observation and you made this part of your teaching. This is exactly what we need to do as teachers, to teach and then reflect upon your teaching, what works with your set of students, what doesn't, and make changes. So experience also shows that you're thinking and reflecting upon your teaching, and that is the road to becoming a more effective teacher. And you also mentioned about the role of the mentor teacher just now while you were relating your experience. Your mentor teacher role was crucial because she suggested, an alternative to how to teach new vocabulary. So your experience also highlights the importance of mentor teachers who should be there and who are there to provide assistance. Thank you so much, Wenya. Let's have Selena back on. Are you there, Selena?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you please relate your experience? How did your teaching practice was back in Indonesia, and how the new knowledge you learned here during a one semester here in Malaysia helped you back there in Indonesia?
All right, I will try to explain it using my slide. First of all, I'm sorry that for the inconvenience because I don't know why my video didn't show up. Maybe because of technical issue, but I hope that you can still understand my explanation through this slide. Okay. Okay. Next slide. the slide big enough? I hope everyone can see the slide.
Selena, is it okay if I make a phone call? I call you now?
Through a phone call?
Because we can't hear you.
I think my audio works
I
just
think my
fine.
audio works just fine.
Or you prefer to use phone?
To use.
Okay, phone call is okay.
Okay. So sorry, Selena, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Can you please relate your experience?
All right.
Dr. Nur Hakima, I think you're going to play the slides. That's coming on. All right. Yes, Selena. Can you please continue? We can hear you.
Please go to the Android button. As I said before, that I was studying for one semester in UPM, and one of the courses that I took was English language teaching materials with Dr. Kim. And to be honest, I was having some difficulties during the beginning of the semester because I was the only mobility student in that class. So I knew no one there. And what made it harder was that at the beginning of the semester, the class was conducted online. So basically, I never met them in person, neither the lecturer nor the classmates. And because I never took this class before, so it was a little bit hard for me to adapt to the class. Because when I was studying in my home university, we mainly focused on projects and how to be a good teacher. But in this course, we were focusing on how to deal with the materials. But after some times, I got used to the class and I was able to keep up to the materials. Okay, so I would like to share my experience during my teaching practicum in Indonesia. Before I went to Malaysia, to be precise, on January this year, I did my practicum teaching in Indonesia for about 1 month. This is the picture of the school and the class. It is a new school that only established in 2017. It is located in a rural area. It's 1 hour from Jakarta. And the building itself is located in the middle of the rice field. So it's quiet and far from the noisy thing that might disturb the students during the learning activity. So I did my teaching practicum in junior high school for about 1 month. If I remember correctly, Malaysia has 5 level or grade in secondary school, from Form 1 until Form 5. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, we have 3 years of junior high school and 3 years of senior high school. So back to the teaching practicum. The school is located in a rural area and in the middle of the rice field. So when it is raining, the road becomes really slippery and we need to be really careful or else we might fall. And of course, we don't want that will happen because it will be really, really bad. As a new school, they don't have their own learning management system for now. So they just use Credo. It's an app for educational purposes, similar to Google Classroom. And also they're using WhatsApp group. In one batch or grade, usually there are like 6 until 7 classes, and each class consists of around 30 students, dominated with female students. I supposedly teaching 2 classes in this school, but I was doing my teaching practicum during pandemic, so we need to minimize the amount of students in one class. Then the student came up with this idea to split one class into 2. That's why I am teaching 4 classes in a week. To be honest, it was really tiring for me because I live in Jakarta and it took 1 hour to go there with my motorcycle. So let's talk about students' proficiency level and also their socio-economic status. As they live in rural area, and they are mostly come from lower middle class families whose parents work as factory workers. So they are not really exposed to English in their daily basis and only learn English during the 2 hours of English class in the school. They don't speak English at home and they are afraid to study English in school. Why? Because they think that English is difficult. They have this prejudice about English and make it hard for English teacher to teach them. And that's what I experienced during my teaching practicum.
Are you okay, Selena?
Yes, I will continue with slide 6.
Okay.
Sorry, that's okay. Can you please move the slide?
Slide 6. It's okay. I can continue, Selena.
Okay. Okay, so I feel like it's safe to say that what I have learned in university didn't completely reflect the real classroom. The first impression that I got in the first meeting of my teaching practicum was like, this is not what I expected. But as a pre-service teacher, I need to be professional and continue what I'm supposed to do. I noticed that there was some similarities and differences between the theory and actual classroom. Some of the similarities are the principle that we use of task for reading, such as inferencing, interpreting, and also drawing conclusion. I have 2 weeks to teach analytics for reading skills, and I use the textbook as a guidance. The text given in the textbook and what I learned in the class are totally the same. And it did work for the students as they were able to interpret and drawing conclusion from the text given. Another 2 weeks were used to teach passive voice, and I used this presentation practice production method. And I was really surprised that the students were able to find the understanding for this material. They were able to produce their own passive voice sentences using some words given by me. The last one is the use of simple game to attract and engage students. there was a moment when the students became so boring in the class, and I feel like I need to do something to overcome it. So I came up with this idea and made it into a simple game. I wrote some vocabularies from the text and asked them to translate it into Indonesian. To make it more challenging, I divided the class into 4 groups. I feel like competition is always the best motivation for students. And as a result, they will compete in peace to translate as many as they could. But when I was studying in UPM, I learned about how to emerging technologies. Can you still hear me?
Yes, Selena, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I learned about how to emerging technologies as ELT materials. And from that time, I know some application or website that the teacher can use to make the learning activity become more interactive. There are field guides, Toolkit, Kahoot, quizzes, and many more interesting apps that we can use to teach English. However, most schools in Indonesia are not allowing the students to bring mobile phone because they are afraid it will distract students' attention during the class. So it's such a shame that we cannot use it in class since the app itself is really attractive and entertaining for students. For ESL students, they may have more exposure to English since it's a second language. But in Indonesia, especially in rural area, it's totally different. The only time they meet with English is in English class. The other possibility is they can find it in social media. Thus, if only they use it to learn or getting English exposure. There is also this bad stigma among people who try to speak English. Most people will say, don't try so cool by using English. Or, what are you doing? Just speak Bahasa Indonesia. Something like that. And it makes students become less confident to speak English. The last one is EFL students have less hours of English class compared to EFL students. For junior high school, they only have 2 hours of English class in a week, with a duration of 40 minutes per 1 hour lesson. Meanwhile, if I remember correctly, the Turkey mentioned that in Malaysia, they have 6 until 8 hours of English class in a week. Now, this is such a big gap. The next slide, please. As I already completed my teaching practicum, so I must say that these are something that I will do to overcome the conflict when I become a teacher in the future. First, I will ask permission from the headmaster to allow students to bring mobile phone only when they have English class. But if the headmaster doesn't give the permission, I may make it as a homework where students can do it at home. The key to adapt class for me is being comfortable in class. So I will do the same for my students. I will make them comfortable around me and comfortable with English. Once they become comfortable, it will be easier for them to learn English. This may seem simple, but it really affects students. During my last 2 weeks of teaching practicum, students were more open and comfortable around me, so it's easier for me to teach them passive voice. They didn't feel nervous or afraid anymore. The last 2 points are really important for me because having someone or even a community where we can speak freely is a blessing. So I would like to make an English community and familiarize the student with the English environment. I want to make an environment where students who speak English are not seen as attention seeker or wants to be seen as a cool person. I want to familiarize them and make them thoroughly comfortable and enjoy to speak English without the worry of being wrong. The last thing that I would like to share is that I have some valuable lessons that I learned during the program. First, I feel like I will pay more attention on teaching materials, not only teaching methods and approaches. Because teaching materials also important for students to learn. The good teaching material will make them easier to understand. And then I will always considering students' perspective regarding the learning activities. I also realized that studying abroad means we become representative of our country. What we do, how we think, how we speak, how we behave, it really reflects our country. So we really need to be careful to behave and didn't embarrass our country. And the last one is being a teacher is not easy, but it's wonderful because we are teaching and learning at the same time. We teach the student to understand the materials, and at the same time, we learn how to teach the best way. And we learn how to understand the students and to make them comfortable around us. That's enough from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Selena. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Your exposure, from what I can gather what you've said, your exposure to teaching English here while you were here in Malaysia was English as a second language. But when you went back to Indonesia, you were teaching in a context where it is a foreign language. So this is excellent. You analyze, you observe what would suit best for your context, and you used approaches and techniques that were best for your context. So you use games, quizzes, competitions, you prepared suitable teaching materials, and you were also culture sensitive. You were aware of your culture, how what kind of activities would play best in your context, and you were aware of so many things. You made these observations and you acted accordingly. You also try to use technology to make teaching interesting, and you also made sure that students were comfortable to speak in English, since you were aware that some of them were a little apprehensive to speak in English. So you were very sensitive, and that is a quality that is needed as teachers. When we teach, we need to be sensitive to our context, and you are on your way to being a very effective teacher. Thank you so much, Selena and Rinya, for sharing your valuable experiences. Now that we have heard from the two pre-study speeches, it would be great to hear your thoughts, Dr. Hakima. As a teacher educator, can you please tell us more about the challenges that teacher trainees face?
Okay, the challenges before that, let me share the screen and I'll show you two different sets of slides.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's good to be back here in the same platform, but now I'm wearing different hat. So today, as you can see on the slide, reading the young teacher's mental model. So the whole idea is about inviting my two trainees or students, is they are going to share with you their journey of becoming a teacher in a land of far, far away, which is the teaching profession, and they still have long way to go. So if you remember Shrek, he is the king of the kingdom of far, far away. So these two are the king and queens of the land far, far away. All right. So to consolidate what Selena and also Wen Yang has shared with you. So the first section when to address what Tanbir asked me, what are the challenges in learning how to teach? Because Selina is in Malaysia for one whole semester, 14 weeks roughly. And according to literature, these are some of the challenges that pre-service teachers are facing when it comes to learning how to teach. They need to complete several credit hours, and in order to do that, they experience actually some challenges. For example, they need to challenge themselves to be more critical, to develop authentic tasks, to develop authentic activity close to the real profession. And at this point, before they go for practicum experience, they are still in the transition period, shifting from training to the micro-teaching mode. And the next challenge is actually the dilemma, because I think both of them indirectly mentioned about assessment. Are they competent enough to design activity that is not training the learners to learn for the purpose of examination or for test, but they are actually doing the activity in the class, do micro teaching, or they themselves need to work on peer evaluation or peer assessment and also self-assessment. And the next challenge is actually establishing the teaching conceptions. So I think you have listened to Selina just now. She finally realized that the learner's perspective has to be taken into consideration, where they are in a rural area, what kind of socioeconomic background. So the teaching conception is narrowed down to the context that she is in. So she has established the concept or the teaching conception. And then when it comes to micro-teaching, as a student, so pre-service teachers, they actually receive less specific feedback from their peers. So this is in relation to the dilemma and also transition. And they actually struggle, or they are looking for the process of teaching because they have not been to school yet as a full-fledged teacher or even for practicum, And then when we talk about emotional support, I think both of them mentioned the concept of support. So emotional support is not just on they themselves as pre-service teachers, they are also considering the support to be given to the students. So the support at the faculty level is needed, sometimes not given, sadly, and sometimes they also need to look for emotional support from the academic advisors and sometimes from their peers. So again, this is one of the challenges when we talk about learning how to teach for pre-service teachers. The seventh challenge is actually the knowledge transfer. So before they go to school, at least for 6 semesters, for example, they need to be able to be brave enough to integrate the relevant knowledge and skills that they have learned throughout this training experience to their real practice. So the question now is, or the issue is, what is the realistic view of their role? Who am I as a teacher when they are in the training session? Now back to Wen Yang's session. So this is an environment where I consider as teaching how to learn. So when Yang has been in school, his sharing is solely about practicum experience. Again, we have to remember that as a pre-service teacher, he also experienced at least 7 challenges. So the first one is hierarchical power. It doesn't matter where they are, whether in ESL context or EFL context, we need to remember that there's always hierarchy, and there's always discrepancies or differences in terms of perspective between the mentor teachers and the pre-service teachers, because the pre-service teachers or PST, they are still in the process of picking up which strategy, which methodology, which approach works well for their case, for their context. And the next challenge is they're also in the transition from the university student to the actual classroom teaching. So to carry themselves as a teacher, not as a practicum teacher, but as a teacher within that 3 months or 12 weeks, that is a challenge. The next challenge is actually when we talk about dilemma, because again, there's differences in terms of conceptual in teaching, pedagogical, institutional, interest, and also ethical. So when we talk about dilemma, the pre-service teachers carry themselves with a set of knowledge, I must say, but for them to test in the actual practice. And then when we talk about fourth challenge is the conflicting ideologies and teaching conceptions. Again, in relation to number 3, if for example, the school is very focusing very much on discipline, for example. So the school expects you as a pre-service teachers not to create group work activity because it will create noise, or if you again, if you conduct a group work activity, the students will move in the classroom. So that again will lead to chaos. So again, this is conflicting ideology between peer learning and also teacher-centered learning. And then when we talk about the fifth challenge, that is the friction. So we can also see that at this point, because they are not full-fledged teachers, pre-service teachers embark their journey into their practicum experience, they actually construct and reconstruct consistently their personal language learning experience. So what they learn as a learner, what they learn as a trainee, now they need to practice it in the school. So there's always friction, why they need to change. Of course, personally, they feel reluctant to change, but there's a need. If there is a need, they need to change. And the sixth support, again, the element of support. The challenge is sometimes they get the support from teacher educators who only be in the school for about 2 to 3 times. It depends on how many supervisions required. And of course, they have to rely on the mentor. So this is why the mentor's role in practicum or teaching how to learn is very important, because mentors not only will guide them, but mentor will provide the real picture, what teaching is all about in that particular context. So that's why the senior teacher or the senior leader in Malaysia, their senior leader, middle leader. So this is their role, to provide support from administrators to the mentors, and also support from the teacher educator. The seventh challenge, I must say, is the problem solving, because in school, I think both of them, they have specified the challenges in terms of assessment, in terms of classroom management, in terms of group dynamics, in terms of, for example, whether or not to have this pedagogical reasoning behind every activity that they design. So the problem solving skill is really challenged at this point, because this is where teaching how to learn is where the learners need to bring in their capacity to exercise the teacher's side of them into the school culture. To fit or not to fit in, that is another question. Therefore, it goes back to the same idea, which is the realistic view of what teaching is all about. Who am I as a teacher when I embark into this journey? Shall I continue, or Tanvir, shall I continue, or?
Yes, please. Please continue. You can change the slides as well. Yeah, thank you. Please continue.
So I'll just go through again. We have been listening to stories by two perspectives or two countries, one in China, one in Indonesia. One similarity between these two stories are actually, the similarity is they are sharing with you in the form of storytelling their identity. So when we talk about teacher identity, among the pre-service teachers, there are so many definitions, but I will just look for one, which is given by Day. Teacher identity for pre-service teachers is simply the way we make sense of ourselves and the image of ourselves that we present to others. So they are newbies. They are still teachers in the making. So they really want to project their image of themselves to others. Therefore, if you talk about the teacher's mental model, back to my first slide just now, when we talk about teacher identity, identity itself is actually the teacher's mental model, where the teachers, pre-service teachers, construct understanding of how to be a teacher, how to act as a teacher, and how to relate to others, the administrators, the mentor teachers, even the students. So they are doing that, if you remember their stories, yeah? So we also look at, when we talk about teacher identity, we can also refer to how these pre-service teachers try to make sense of self closely related to the visioning of self. So they visualize themselves as what kind of teachers they're going to be in the next 5 years. So because of that, when we talk about teacher identity, we can actually refer to one particular concept or theory, I must say. I hate to use the word theory, but yeah, to explain further what is it about the role and also teacher identity, we can refer to one theory, which is possible self theory. So in this theory, there are three selves that teachers or pre-service teachers tend to reflect on who they are. So the selves which one would like to attain, the selves which one feels he or she is expected to become, and also the selves which one is avoiding. They try very hard not to be like this. So these are the three selves that the teachers are actually going through as they embark on their practicum journey. So furthermore, the theorists, Marcus and Nereus, actually they highly proposed that people's future guides directing and regulating their behavior. So these teachers, Selina and Wen Yang, for example, their stories indirectly share with you how they regulate themselves. So self-regulation is one of the key concepts here as they try to fit themselves into the teaching context. So if we go further, I'll just go through very quickly. So what Selina and also Wen Yang has shared in China, for example, he highlighted to us just now, he noticed that we in Malaysia, we tend to teach according to the Aristotle methodology, whereas in China, the base is actually on Confucianism. So Selina, for example, noticed one similarity in terms of pedagogy, which is in teaching, grammar teaching. We are in Indonesia and Malaysia, we tend to use or adopt the presentation, practice, and production. So when the teachers consciously question themselves, their role, and then they took a stance, who they are as they teach in the classroom. So this is actually a retrospective process of envisioning themselves as professional or as a teacher. So pre-service teachers practice and also professional identity have been viewed in as a new approach to develop themselves as a teacher. However, as you notice, the attention, even in the literature now, the attention has been given to linking teaching practical experience and second language teaching training experience that mediate this reflection is actually given less attention. So because of that, if you notice the stories that they share with you indirectly consists of three levels of reflection: who they are as a teacher, where they are teaching. So that's why they emphasize the learner's emotion, the role of context, and also when they are teaching specific language skills. So if you listen carefully to their story, you will notice the three embedded content within the story. So I will not go through in detail, but to highlight that why I would like to emphasize the role of identity among the pre-service teacher, they are still at this stage 1 and 2, because at the moment, what they have is just the experience as a trainee. So experiential is actually one of the aspects for teachers to develop themselves and also to construct their identity. So identity as a product of teacher education or process of training, that is the experiential aspect of identity construction. At this point, because they have been to school, both of these storytellers, so because of that, they are also in the second aspect or stage known as the developmental stage. So experience that they gain over time during their experience as a learner, during the training, as a novice teacher soon, and perhaps 10 years from now. So this is the developmental. So it is actually gradually, this developmental experience will actually help them in a way to construct who they see themselves as a teacher. So soon, when they become a full-fledged teacher, you will also notice that their narrative story will become more in-depth. They will also realize more on the contextual elements of identity development and also the agentic or the capacity to structure the classroom practice. So there are many ways for identity to develop, but at this point, at this stage, I think our storytellers, they are in stage 1 and stage 2. So what they have done just now, they narrated the stories in the mode of reflection, and we can hear the perspective from China and also from Indonesia. So what they are doing is actually they are moving beyond just compilation of experience towards the deeper understanding. So that is why they can justify to you why they created certain activities, for example, to encourage group dynamics, why they changed the way they reprimand the learners, for example. So what transpires behind it is actually the interaction of pedagogical content knowledge. However, what is beyond or the extended interpretation of pedagogical content knowledge is knowledge of self and also knowledge of learners. So that's why they can talk to you in detail about what they did in the school and also with the students. All right. So the stories that they have shared with you are actually from two different perspectives: learning how to teach and also teaching how to learn. They combine these two and make it into a real practice when they are in school, right? So I think I can stop sharing right now, unless we have.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nohakima. I'll just briefly summarize what you've said. You've talked about the 7 challenges, and I think the most important thing you highlighted is that as teachers, they're learning how to teach, and they're teaching. They're also learning. They're also teaching how to learn, and to the experiences that you've heard today. Pre-service teachers. The pre-service teachers are very critical of their teaching, and there's a need to move them from test-based teaching, learning-based teaching, covering in the classroom, and the pre-service teachers need to be aware of their context, where they are teaching, and what practices suit best for that context, so that awareness is very important. And also, pre-service teachers are making the transition from a practicum teacher to being a real full-fledged teachers. So as administrators, mentors, and teacher educators, we need to be aware of these transitions and guide them in their journey to being a teacher. I think we have run out of time, and we do not have any questions in the comment box. Dr. Nohakima, what would be your parting words or message for pre-service teachers?
My parting words. Can I say it in the form of slide?
Sure. Please go ahead.
Okay. I'm not going to go through in detail, but if you see how to move forward when it comes to establishing and constructing the self as an identity, part of the identity is professional identity, which is a teacher. So at this point, I think pre-service teachers, they're an orchestra conductor, I must say, because when they get these 4 experience from the second language teacher education, from the teacher educators, from the mentors, and from the pre-service teachers themselves. So if they combine all these 4, they can move forward, because they not only become a successful orchestra coordinator, they can bring in all the elements according to theory to the practice according to their context. That is my final say.
Thank you so much once again, Dr. Nohakima. With that, we have come to the end of the forum, and we hope that you have gained some insights into effective teacher training and enjoyed the session. We wish to thank our speakers for spending their precious time with us on this platform, and to our wonderful participants, thank you all for attending. We would also like to thank the Education Technology Division, MOE, for this platform, and all my lovely colleagues here at IPG KBA who have been working behind the scenes. Please do not forget our next webinar, Strengthening the Teaching of Foreign Language via the English Connection, which will be held which will be held on the 12th of September and will be live at the same time, 10 a.m. Malaysian time. Till then, goodbye from Malaysia.